We're here now with the author of a new book that's out, Randall Sullivan. It's the first All-Star game, Babe Ruth, FDR and America at the Crossroads. Randall Sullivan, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here today.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
So we want to get started here, and we'll jump right in. I kind of look at this book as, if you're not a baseball fan, you still might find it really fascinating. It's with America 250 going on. It's really just a great historical sort of look at a lot of things that were going on in the 20s and 30s. So I'm just kind of curious, Randall, what made you want to write a book like this?
Well, really, it began with a feeling of despondence about the state of the country and the polarization and the animosity between people. And I thought, well, the country has survived worse than this, and the Civil War and the Great Depression. And that led to really reading a lot about the Great Depression. And I realized that, the country plummeted for about 3.5 years. And then in the late spring and early summer of 1930 or 1933, it, began to bottom out and even tick back up. And I thought, well, what happened then? And one of the things that happened, maybe the most significant thing that happened, was this exhibition baseball game between the best players from the American League and the best players from the National League. And it really had the effect of lifting national spirits and reminding people that how good it can feel when everything comes together.
Getting into the historical aspect of it, kind of starting out, like you said, with the attempted assassination, and the book sort of follows this steady decline of the country and the stock market crash, and how, it affected the players and the entire country. But this idea of the World's Fair was sort of brought about as like a way to bring back spirits as things are coming back up. Why was it so important, do you think, that this was tied to an event like the World's Fair to make this happen? That, it may not, an all-star game or something else may not have really worked had there not been this tie to sort of making this big push of, we're going to show off how America can still be America.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Chicago was sort of stuck with the World's Fair because as it happened, they voted for the bond to finance it on October 28th, 1929, the day before the stock market crashed. So they went from this great enthusiasm, the country's soaring, and we're going to stage this event in Chicago that will celebrate, America's, century of, technological innovation. And now, the country's plummeting, and we still have to put on a World's Fair. But Chicago rallied wonderfully to make it happen, and then added the game as an additional feature. And so they both contributed to this idea that Americans can still make great things happen. We are far from, we may be down, but we're far from out.
And like you said, it's sort of, as you talked about why you wanted to write the book and things going on now, it digs into the different market things that were happening at the time. And I think there's some parallels that could be drawn there for people that are sort of reading now as you look at maybe the AI bubble or things like that. But turning back more towards baseball, Babe Ruth, is a central figure that you focus on, who really was, obviously still today, but at that time was larger than life. If that, he was all on board, as you write, that he wanted to be a part of it, but just how important was that? Like, if he was like not against, wanting to be in it, like it just probably would have fallen apart, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it was. He was the critical element. Everybody knew that because the level at which Babe Ruth was adored and esteemed by the American public, no matter what we all know the great legend and, was Babe Ruth. But, until I started working on this book, I still didn't realize his enormity. I didn't realize what a towering figure he was. And I mean, there's never been anyone in American sports to compare to Babe Ruth in terms of his importance to the American public. And, and it was kind of appropriate too, because he was at the, tag end of his career. He was fading pretty quickly. This was the last decent season he'd have, actually. So, he's fat and almost 40, can barely move around in the outfield. And yet he's the one everybody wants to see. In fact, the other players, a lot of the National League players, their main excitement was we get to be on the same field with Babe Ruth, So, he was a huge draw. And to have him say he wanted to do this was a giant thing. And then to have him show up and, like I said, sort of, a fading Babe Ruth, but rise to the occasion and be the star, the by far the biggest star in that first game was really a exhilarating moment for the fans and for the whole country.
You talk about how, in the book how there was sort of this struggle of not wanting it to be favoritism in Chicago and building the rosters. You've got a coin flip to decide whether it's going to be played at Wrigley or Comiskey Park. Comiskey Park wins the coin flip, which turns out to be a success because they're able to fit more people there, right? With the 50,000 seats. But just in terms of how that all plays out, why is it important, for that origin story, of all of these little things that come together to make this game? Why is that origin story something that people today should want to care about when they talk about the All-Star game?
Well, because there was sort of a magical quality of things falling into place around this game, and it sort of it feels like it was sort of a blessed event, and the country was being blessed too. And like I said, there's never been a time in our history where people needed to be reminded that we can come back. We can still do things. And so, and a lot of people I know are not feeling at all good about the where the country is right now. But and I think they need to be reminded that the country has come back many times before, and it will again. And it remains a country to be proud of. And the thing to be most proud of is the incredible resiliency of the spirit of this country.
Um, Based off of what happened once the game actually played, were there any players or stories from it that you think that maybe modern fans don't know, or something that you put into the book, but is something that maybe people should absolutely know about it walking away from reading it?
Well, the two managers were the greatest managers in baseball history. Well, I think a lot of people would agree, but also they were two men who really brought the history of baseball into that game. They went back to the 1880s. They'd played in the era when a visiting team had to go back to its hotel, with their mitts on top of their heads to protect themselves from the rocks and bricks being thrown at them, to or at the polo field dodge the umbrella spears that were being thrown at them off rooftops, to uh, the live ball era, and the enormous popularity of baseball. So they were great characters, and as it happened, one of the umpires in the game was sort of it was the deepest animosity in all of baseball was between John McGraw, the manager, and this umpire Bill Clem. So their interactions were, I thought, really amusing, to say the least. And but things, there were a lot of anomalies too. I mean, the idiosyncrasy of of a baseball in any public event. The first run batted in an all-star game was by Lefty Gomez, who was arguably the worst hitter in the history of baseball. But he got up with men aboard, and literally just stuck his bat out and blooped a little pop fly that went over the second baseman's head and became the first RBI in the history of the All-Star game.
The All-Star game has carried on. When fans are watching the All-Star game today, What are some of the traditions or elements to look for that can be directly traced back to that first game in 1933?
Well, the whole idea is that, and Arch Ward insisted on this, that it should be played by the best players right now. It shouldn't, you shouldn't get in on legacy. You should get in on being the best players in the game right now. And the fans in general went along with that. And, the best example of that was the fact that Rogers Hornsby got hardly any votes. And he'd been the second best player in baseball for some time. Uh, uh, and yet, didn't even come close to being included in this game. So there's that. Um, the idea that, the whole league should be represented. There should be somebody from every team. Um, that's continued. And uh, and of course, the idea that the pitcher should be limited in their innings so that they can go all out. And in those days, going 9 innings or 15 innings for a starting pitcher was common. It isn't at all like today. So the idea that we're going to limit these guys to 3 innings then, and so they can fire away with everything they've got. Now it's 1 inning, but you don't have to hold anything back as a pitcher.
And obviously, being able to have a few more pitchers than they had on the roster back then helps as well. When you look at the All-Star game in general, obviously this year being held in Philadelphia, the patriotism surrounding America 250. Do you think that the game still carries the same meaning today as it did back then?
It would be really difficult to match the significance of that first game because it represented so much and the country was at such a low point. But I do feel, it isn't like I planned it, but the fact that the book is coming out shortly before a game played, on the 250th anniversary of the country in the city where the country was invented, I think does allow for some parallels to be drawn, and it seems meaningful to me.
You look at the game of baseball where it is today compared to where it was then, and the popularity and the exposure that the modern game can give. When you think of all of those things and you look at all the research you did for the book, do you think that if it was invented today that it would still succeed?
The All-Star game?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know that it would be as big an event because in 1933, baseball was 10 times as popular as football and basketball put together. It was the sport. So its dominance in the American mind and the American imagination, can't be matched today. But that said, I think baseball is more woven into the fabric of America, especially into the history of America, than any other sport. And so, when something like this annual tradition of the All-Star game happens, I think it creates a sense of connectivity to, our origins, our past, all of the things we've come through as a country.
This is Randall Sullivan. His book is The First All-Star Game, Babe Ruth, FDR, and America at a Crossroads. Randall, before we let you go, I just want to give you the opportunity to kind of give us the reason that if folks have watched this long, why should they go out and pick this book up?
Well, because I think it's in a way, it'll give you a view of baseball history that nothing else does. But I think it also gives you a view of American history that nothing else does. It's a slice of America at this absolutely critical juncture, a slice of the world, actually. Like I said, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany and Roosevelt became President of the United States just a couple of weeks apart. So it's all of that, but as I said earlier, it's really a story of America making a comeback and reminding itself that it was capable of that when that was in real doubt. So I think it's an uplifting story and an uplifting book.
Well, Randall, thank you so much. We appreciate the time. Randall's book, you can find it where most books are sold. And I'm at Albert for Fox43.com. Thanks for watching.